Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about poverty and inequality. First of all, why is this important? Well, personally, I'm a political science major and I want to minor in poverty, inequality, and social justice. So I wanted to get some background information before getting into the field. And generally, this affects the United States and it is an ongoing global issue, as we will further explore in the next couple of slides. Okay, first of all, let's get some background information. On regards of definitions, first, poverty is the state or condition in which a person or community lacks the financial resources and essentials for a minimum standard of living. The World Bank considers someone to be extremely poor when living on $1.25 or less per day. This is considered in American dollars. And inequality, from an economic perspective, is the difference in the distribution of income, pay, wealth. This is often related to disabilities, ethnic background, and gender. Further exploring inequality, there are three types of inequality. First, income, where it considers all money received from employment, investment, savings, state benefits, pensions, and rent. The second is pay, which refers to payment from employment only. And the third is wealth, where this is the total amount of assets of an individual or household. And another definition is the Gini coefficient, which is a monetary tool that measures inequality in the distribution of family income in a country. It is measured from 0 to 100, where the higher the number is, the more unequal the society. Meaning that if a society has, or a country has a record or a coefficient of 0, this means that they are equal, and if it has 100, it is unequal. The problem with the Gini coefficient is that it does not reflect opportunity, quality of life, and the ability to prosper. So basically meaning that it is not as accurate as one would want to. Okay. Let's get some data on this. In the United States, in 2017, the U.S. Census Bureau reported that 12.3% of Americans were under the poverty threshold. This accounts for 39.7 million people in total. And at a global scale, the World Bank reports that 10% of the world population lives on less than $1.90 a day. That is 734 million people who have to survive with less than $1.90 every single day. Sub-Saharan Africa is the world's poorest region. 414 million people in this area are considered to be extremely poor. Okay, here's a graphic of the World Bank data that shows how many people are living under the $1.95 a day. And this is adjusted for purchasing power parity, which is how much you can buy in one country compared to another. So basically, it factors in the quantity that you can buy in the United States compared to other countries. And as you can see, there's this trend of reducing from the 1980s of having 43% uh, of the population living under $1.95 a day to now having only 10%, which is still a high number, so this needs to be changed. Okay, and some other information on the Gini coefficient worldwide. You can see countries that are in Africa and South America usually have high rates of inequality. So, for example, Brazil is one that has a record between 50 and 60, which would mean that it is very unequal. How is this relevant? You may be wondering. Let's explore some more on that. Okay, first, in the United States, rural areas of the South and Southwest have the highest numbers of impoverished people and very low living conditions. And the issue is that their Economies have been driven by agriculture, having a light emphasis on education and innovation, so they are not likely to prosper as time goes on. Okay, so this brings increased health problems, reduced access to nutritionally adequate food, and high levels of crime, which are patterns found in poor areas of the country. And a poor and uneducated population usually brings more generations of undereducated adults without achieving any upward mobility or escape from poverty. And there are higher mortality rates because of less access to funding for treating acute or chronic diseases in poor areas. Okay. Now considering it from a global scale, many children die before adolescence and adult mortality before middle age is high. So we can see that mostly in Africa, people are struggling to have access to healthcare systems. Therefore, this is why there are low expectancy ages. Okay. When comparing mortality rates, a factor that greatly influences the number is income. So, as you can see from this graph, the wealthier a person is, um, the more years they're expected to live, while someone who's poor is going to live less years. Okay. And another problem that poverty brings is that violence and terrorism are usually responses to governments who do not supply basic needs for their people. Groups as Al Qaeda gain so many followers because they are able to provide some type of stability to those people living in the area. So that is why we see so many violent groups in in Africa mostly and Venezuela. Now let's consider poverty from an economic perspective. There are three approaches for poverty from an economic perspective. The first one is classical and neoclassical approach. The classical perspective considers that individuals are responsible for their own destiny and decided to become poor. And those who emphasize on the classical model say that the state should limit aid to change individual behavior by increasing capabilities and attitudes. The neoclassical approach or theories consider additional factors other than individual choice. Lack of social and private assets, exploiting markets, barriers to education, immigration, poor health, and barriers to employment are some of the additional causes for poverty. And for the classical and neoclassical approach, overcoming poverty is about incentivizing individual behavior and a relationship between productivity and income. So basically, giving reasons the for individuals to increase productivity. The second one is the Keynesian or neoliberal approach. They establish that the government serves as a means to increase inequality, where governments have the potential to encourage participation of the disadvantaged groups of society. Publicly provided funds have an important role to play as physical and human capital being the foundation for economic prosperity. So if there's not enough public funds, then people are not gonna overcome poverty. And it still considers individual choices as one of the causes for poverty. To overcome poverty, they say that publicly provided capital is a key factor, where physical and human capital are the foundation for economic prosperity. The third approach is the Marxian or radical. They establish that economic growth alone is insufficient to lift poor people out of poverty because those who belong to a certain social classes do not benefit from income growth. They focus on group characteristics, where individuals progress according to the socioeconomic environment in which they live. And they think that poverty is a moral and technical issue. And to overcome poverty, they say that adequacy of income, which means making sure people are properly paid, is important. Minimum wage laws, elimination of dual markets, and anti-discrimination laws are necessary to alleviate poverty. Okay. Um, some of the newer approaches are the social exclusion and social capital. Through these methods, individuals want to understand the intrinsic processes that allow poverty to rise and persist in a society. In other words, they try to understand if people become poor because of how society is structured. And to overcome poverty, um, first of all, it's important to establish that quantifying and addressing poverty is challenging because this theory defines poverty with less precision and more uh, broadly or widely. The focus should be on community development rather than the individual. Okay, so this brings me to my last section of the presentation, which is my conclusion. First of all, poverty is an ongoing issue that affects millions of people and increases inequality and mortality rates. There are different economical approaches to address poverty, where some do not necessarily account for inequality. And I think that it is up to each government to adopt the necessary policies to help their population overcome these issues. As it has been shown on this presentation, most models suggest that the government should take some kind of approach. Some models suggest more than others, but overall, it is up to our leaders to make a difference. That's it. Thank you for listening and have a good one.